everyone. My name is Isabel. I'm a consultant at the Oakland University Writing Center, and this is the first video of our educational video series. Today, I wanted to talk about analysis. What the heck does it mean when your professor asks you to provide analysis? This word comes up a lot on assignment instructions, in professor comments, and it can cause a lot of confusion, especially if you don't really know what exactly that means and what that means for you and for that particular paper. So we're going to kind of talk about, the places that you would actually need to provide analysis and some ways that you can do that, and especially how analysis differs from summary. So let's get started. So a lot of times you are going to be asked to provide analysis on a variety of different kinds of papers or assignments, but most specifically, you might be asked to do this on a rhetorical analysis paper, a research paper. You may be asked to do this in lab reports, case studies, or even personal reflections where you have to analyze your own kind of learning. So analysis is very much a catch-all term for a way of thinking, for a mode of critical thinking and reflecting on what's happening. So summary and analysis are not the same thing. And there's different features of each, which we're going to go over to make sure that when you're asked to analyze, you're actually analyzing and you're not necessarily just summarizing. So the purpose of a summary is to reduce information already known down to its essential parts in abbreviated form. So you're basically kind of just spitting back out things that you've already read, things that you already know in your own words. So you're summarizing main points, key supporting points. You might use direct quotes or paraphrases to help you convey those things, but they're completely objective. Summaries don't evaluate, judge, or interpret any sort of information. They just present the facts as the original person intended. So, there's no personal reactions, no biases, no opinions, no personal beliefs. They're just kind of, this is what the facts say, and this is what they are. But compared to analysis, however, it's taking a summary and bringing it a step further. So you're taking information or something you've read and you're interpreting it and finding meanings or patterns within that information. So you're taking a step beyond summary and you're describing your own personal findings, your own ways of interpreting the source material, your own ways of what does this all mean? So a lot of times analysis is presented after like a statement of evidence, which, can be a direct quote, can be a summary. It can come after a summary, or it may be a paraphrase. But usually after that evidence is presented, the analysis of the evidence doesn't summarize or describe the information, but it's going to uncover something new about that information. So it's providing readers with a more thorough understanding of the facts presented and helping them dig deeper and understand, okay, but what does this really mean? So obviously analysis, we still want to avoid personal reactions, biases, opinions, and beliefs, but those things can influence the way we interpret things because we all have our own, backgrounds and things that influence the way we interpret information and experiences. And that's perfectly okay. But analysis still has to be rooted in facts and patterns. So there are a couple ways that we're going to talk about, ways that you can provide analysis within a paragraph, within an entire paper, within an assignment. And we're going to touch on 5 big things today. So when you provide analysis, there are a couple things that you can focus on. You can talk about the relevance of evidence, the implications of some evidence, connections between different pieces of evidence, connections between evidence and different outside sources, or you might comment on the relevance of evidence, to personal or social or political issues, kind of like outside implications. So when you want to provide analysis and talk about the relevance of evidence. Something you might ask yourself is, why does this piece of evidence matter to your overall argument? You're making a case for something, and your analysis is what proves why that piece of evidence supports your case. Another way you can do that is to provide implications of evidence. So we have this evidence, we have this argument. What do we do with that? What outcomes, conclusions, or predictions can be made as a result of this evidence? What does all this now ask us to do moving forward? You can also create connections between evidence. Does this piece of evidence support or challenge other evidence that you provided? Does it kind of say the same thing as another piece of evidence you have earlier or in the paragraph, or somewhere else throughout the essay? Like, what's the conversation that's happening between those two pieces of evidence or more? And that can help support your overall argument, because you can show that maybe something is maybe more multifaceted than maybe we once believed, or that, yeah, this is kind of the general consensus, and here's all these pieces of evidence that are saying the same thing. That's why my argument is true, is good. So those are just kind of more evidential ways, and more like smaller scale ways to do analysis within a paragraph or within a paper. But you can also make connections between the evidence you have in your paper and other sources and other outside sources, kind of going along with that same idea of a conversation. Does this piece of evidence support or challenge what other outside sources or conversations are saying? How does this relate to what else is being said about this topic? Does this support or challenge other conclusions that people are making about this issue? And lastly, another really great way to provide analysis is, when you have a piece of evidence, does it support or challenge your personal experiences, the experiences of others, societal norms or expectations? Kind of, what does this analysis mean, kind of going outside of this paper and into reality? Like, what are we supposed to do with this? What are people supposed to take away from this argument? So, all these examples of ways to provide analysis really highlight the ways in which we can use evidence and explain that evidence and justify why our argument is true, and why we should be persuading people to believe this certain thing, or understand that this scientific conclusion we came to is valid. So the last thing I want to end with today is just a quick little example of what this might look like in terms of an actual paragraph in an essay. So I got this from a Writing Center website, the University of Arizona. So here it's kind of color coded and quite helpful, actually. So at the beginning, we have a claim at the beginning of this paragraph. The Wright Brothers Airplane Company Museum of Pioneer Aviation is an example of the retelling of history that uses an ideology to create a public American identity that can influence behaviors. So that is a claim. That's an argument that this writer is making. They're identifying what the subject of this argument is, the Wright Brother Airplane Company. What it's doing, it's retelling history, and it's using an ideology, and why they're doing it to create a public American identity that can influence behaviors. So that's a fantastic claim, but it's a claim that requires some evidence so that we know exactly what they're talking about. So here, by focusing on work ethic and character for realizing dreams, the museum uses the American dream ideology. It takes a specific part of their ideology, and that's what this paragraph is focusing on. So we've narrowed the focus a little bit, and now we're well set up to provide some evidence and provide some analysis. So within the middle part of this paragraph, we have a couple of examples. Success can be achieved by anyone regardless of their circumstances. The museum does this by replacing the story of that historical day. So that's an exact example of what this museum is actually doing. Um, and then the museum shows that the Wrights were not highly educated scientists or engineers. And then we've got some quotes and a citation. So right there, there's such great evidence that is there. And all we need to do now is, why does that evidence support the fact that the Wright Brothers Museum creates a public American identity that can influence behaviors? And here we go at the end of the paragraph. This is what we've got. By creating this identity of an ordinary people who were able to achieve greatness because of character and will, the museum aims to impact visitors to the museum to adopt these same behaviors. If the museum is able to persuade visitors to buy into this ideology and exhibit these same behaviors themselves, this can work to create an overall productive society for America. So here we've explained all the pieces of evidence that we have in this paragraph, what the museum is actually doing to show this ideology and why it matters. Because it matters because we can create this identity of ordinary people being able to achieve greatness. And it matters because those kinds of people can create an overall productive society for America, thus influencing behaviors that we had at the beginning of the paragraph in the claim. So here you can kind of see how intricately you can weave your analysis into your evidence, and how it can really, make a case for whatever claim that you have at the beginning of a paragraph or at the beginning of a paper. So this is just one example, but obviously depending on what kind of paper you're writing or what discipline you're in, analysis might look a little different. But at the end of the day, it's always going to uncover something new about the evidence that you have to support a larger argument or a larger overall claim. So that's the end of this video for today. If you have more questions on analysis, please make an appointment at the Writing Center. Our whole cohort of consultants would be absolutely so excited to have you and talk about analysis. So feel free to utilize that resource. You can make an in-person or an online appointment on our website found on Oakland University's homepage.